Good morning. And now for the Committee on General Government Operations and Appropriations now called to order. Today is Friday, September 22nd, and the time now is 9 o'clock. In compliance with the open government law, the notice for this public hearing were posted on GovGuam Public Notice Portal KGTF, PBS Channel 12, and disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets on Wednesday, September 13th, and then with a corrected memo on Thursday, September 14th, and then again on September 19th, and then change second notice on Thursday, September 21st. And with that, the bill that we will be hearing this morning, the only bill we'll be hearing this morning is Bill 4-37 COR, authored by Senator Jesse Lujan, an act to temporarily suspend the business privilege tax on food and medicine for 12 consecutive months. Fiscal note was requested on January 6th, and it was received and disseminated to all senators via email on the Committee on Rules on January 24th, 2023. Those participating on behalf of Bill 4-37 are invited to the panel. Will you be testifying? If you will be, please sit on the panel. Manual general rules for this public hearing. Please provide my legislative staff with any document for photocopying and distribution. Panel members are asked to remain in the room for question or additional testimony as may be desired by members of the committee. Question and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or the motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of the general rule of conduct will result in removal from the public hearing. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum will be restricted from participating and will be escorted from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. You state your name and your title for the record. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that have joined me this morning. I'll begin with the author of the bill, Senator Jesse Lujan, and I have Senator Roy Kinata, followed by Senator Frank Blas, Senator Chris Duenas, Senator Telo Tairigui, and Senator Joanne Brown. And with that note, I'll ask Senator Lujan to please give his opening statement on his bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. Happy Friday to everybody. Good morning, colleagues and folks that are testifying and people in the audience and also the viewing public of Guam. Thank you very much. Hafaday and happy Friday, everyone. Again, I want to thank the chairman of the committee, Senator Joe S. Agustin, for allowing Bill 4-37 COR to be publicly heard and discussed this morning. I introduced this legislation, this bill, on the first day allowable for the start of the 37th Guam legislature. I introduced this bill because I believe then, as I do now, that the government of Guam needs to do everything possible to provide inflation relief to the people of Guam and businesses of Guam. Over the past 3 years, all goods and services, everything we must pay for and spend our hard-earned income on has increased in price and increased significantly. And this continues to this day. While we have seen some prices ebb and flow in general, prices continue to rise, eating away at everyone's spending power. The pain is real, and it affects many, many families and businesses here on our island in a very, very painful way. The fuel tax suspension decrease will end in December, where you'll see, again, an immediate increase of gas as we see almost on a weekly basis as well. Once again, increasing the cost of basic necessities every family must pay for. The reduction of GRTs on food and medicine will help offset this burden. We need to act to help the people of this once thriving territory. Waiving GRTs on food and medicine will provide some immediate relief to businesses and families. That is a very much needed thing at this point. Most businesses will pass on savings to customers almost immediately. At the same time, just waiving GRTs on these two categories does negatively impact government revenue collections in a significant way. The government can afford this temporary waiver. My legislation seeks a 12-month waiver on GRT on food and medicine, making this practical and timely tax relief something everyone on both sides of the aisle should be able to support. The Longueiro administration has publicly stated, in just this week's publications, and quote, "No one can deny that a dollar just doesn't stretch as far as it used to. Everywhere you look, prices are up, wages feel flat, and people are doing more and more to earn less and less. And despite all their efforts, the administration knows, as a community, we are not where we used to be economically, and there is still so much further to go," unquote. So the administration, when faced with reality, faced with the truth, knows full well our people need help. Waiving GRTs on food and medicine will provide some help, some relief. Knowing this, it should not be a hard decision to gain unanimous support for the passage of Bill 4-37. No one can deny the cost of living in Guam is very high and certainly much higher than the national average. As a legislative body, we should continue to do everything we can to improve the lives of every single person here on Guam. Lowering the cost of food and medicine is an effort no one should object to. The cost of living has made survival on our island difficult for far too many. How many families are making a very difficult sacrifices every day, forced to choose what necessity gets paid for and what can no longer be afforded. Thousands have left our island because they no longer can afford living on Guam. Our paradise and sense of family is slipping away because so many feel like they are fighting for their survival. Suspending GRT for 12 months on food and medicine is a policy we can enact that will provide a direct and immediate benefit to many who desperately need it. As policymakers, our job is to improve the quality of life for every resident on Guam. We should not let this opportunity pass. I ask my colleague to support this measure. It is a practical and prudent measure providing price relief, at the same time not straining or harming other important government programs. I see it as a compromise because I believe we should be rolling back the GRT from 5% to 4%. In its twin bill, I introduced Bill 3-37, and to roll it back to the old rate. But I realize that this measure will probably not garner enough support. However, waiving the GRT on food and medicine is a policy we should all support. Inflation has wreaked havoc on family budgets. We as a legislature can provide this relief, and we should do it immediately. The time is now. I hope my colleagues will rally around this measure and help provide some much needed price relief for our people and businesses deserve. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield to you.
Thank you, Senator On. Now we'll begin with testimony provided by the Department of Revenue and Taxation and also representative of the Rexall Drugs. We'll begin with Ms. Intalan and then followed by Ms. Gabriel and Ms. Herbert, right? Hebert, okay. Ms. Intalan?
Good morning. I am not here to oppose or support the bill. I'm just here to give you statistics on what the impact of the law would be. This is a pretty rough estimate, but it's the best we could come up with given the data that we have available. If we were to suspend food, My name is Jennifer Antalan. I'm with the Department of Revenue and Taxation. Is there anything else you need to know about me? Okay. A little nervous here. So based on the law or the bill that you want to, we are looking at least anywhere from $35 million to $40 million on food alone, to include restaurants. We did not factor out beverages. I'm assuming that would be included in the bill. The reason why it's so high is because of the interpretation of the law. That's one thing. A lot of these mom and pop stores and restaurants don't have POS systems. So they're going to end up just guessing what the cost of, what the sale of the food is. If they're going to do this, would we require them to have a POS system? And the reason that's important because any discrepancies or irregularities on returns would require audits. And that would be a complicated audit because we have to weed out what was, for example, like grocery stores. They sell not just food, they sell other non-food items. So they would have to distinguish the difference between food, beverages, and non-food items. And then with restaurants, the restaurants would be at least, we're looking at 20 million of the 40 million that I estimated would be higher than the groceries because you're tacking on the price of the service to go along with the food. So, I mean, I recommend that maybe part of the bill should require that these stores install a POS system, not just for this bill, but one of the complications we have with audits is a lot of companies do, especially mom and pops, they do a shoebox accounting method. Okay, so with this law, you're asking them to weed out what is considered food in grocery stores. And again, like example, the interpretation of grocery store, mom and pop store would say, well, I don't have a POS system. So I'm gonna say 90% of what I sell is food. So sometimes when each grocery store is different, you see some stores sell more food than non-food. There are some stores that sell a little bit of food, and they're just going to guesstimate if they don't have a proper POS system. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to start first? Please state your name and what company you're from and if you represent them or not.
Okay. Hi. Oh, yes. Good, good. It's pretty loud. Hi, my name is Melissa Gabriel. I'm the pharmacy manager at Guam Rexall Drugs. And Senator Lujan, I just had a question first before I started.
Yes.
I was just wondering, for the removal of tax, is it on prescription medications or also over the counter?
The bill states over the counter. We did not put prescription, but I did receive a letter from the pharmaceutical. Yes,
GPA.
and that is something that we can amend on the floor. Absolutely. But please go ahead with your testimony.
Okay, so yeah, I just want to say, of course, I'm fully in support of this bill. I'm just going to speak on the prescription side of it because I think that this can be something that should be added to the.
It was something we didn't add because I didn't know how that was regulated and all that.
Yeah.
So if you school us on that, we can probably work with you in amending that. But thank you.
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah,
Miss, I just want to make it very clear. Try to avoid asking questions. Just state your presentation, and then they'll ask you questions.
Okay.
It'll be a lot easier that way.
Okay.
Because if you're representing Rexall, you're talking medicine, period. Maybe in part of your presentation be to include and amend the bill to include all medicines.
Okay.
That's how you want to present it, okay?
Okay.
And then we'll move along.
Okay, thank you. It's my first time at a hearing. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, we would like to also include prescription drugs, and this will improve access to essential medications. It will create a fair business environment for our local providers and also enhance Guam's healthcare system and economic well-being. I just want to point out for sales tax on prescription drugs, if we remove it, that will align with national practices. 49 states and Puerto Rico have exempted prescription drugs from state sales tax, and Illinois is the only state that has a reduced sales tax at 1%. And I do have a chart that was provided by the Guam Pharmacy Association that we provided. Another thing is that there is support from international health authorities, such as the World Health Organization, who recommends reducing or eliminating taxes on any pharmaceutical products, especially for the guideline development group with the WHO. They do emphasize there's wide acceptance and feasibility of tax exemptions or reductions on medications. And like you said, there is limited impact on government revenue and patient out-of-pocket expenditures. So benefits on removing or reducing tax on the prescription medications, This will, of course, enhance savings on our local pharmacies, and this can help expand healthcare services. One of the things that it's hard for our local providers our pharmacies to give to people is ordering specialty drugs. And these specialty drugs include high-cost medications like monoclonal antibodies that can be for rare diseases, rare and complex diseases such as like rheumatoid arthritis, cancer. And so these medications, removing that percentage or having that tax on it will definitely help to bring that in, because we are only getting very minimum reimbursement rates from insurance companies. They're really only meeting us at like an average wholesale price, and that's not including any shipping cost. And all of these medications that are specialty that we bring in have to be refrigerated. Another thing, too, to think about is a lot of patients who do need these specialty drugs, the drug companies from the States won't ship to them directly because of the cold refrigeration, and they want to keep the cold chain. So they only do pharmacy to pharmacy. So that's been hard for us, and it could be something that we can start offering, and if we can get this tax removed. Another thing is that removing the tax can create equitable treatment for local providers. Right now, mail order pharmacies operating in Guam don't pay a Guam privilege tax. And so that's putting us at a disadvantage. And these mail order pharmacies are with Guam Revenue Tax. So they do have business licenses here, because that is a requirement with the Guam Board of Examiners for Pharmacy, that they do have to be registered, but none of them pay the same tax that we do. So I would say this is a call for a more equitable approach to level the playing field. Another thing is consistency in tax policy. So right now with the 11 Guam Code 26203 exemption list, there is hospitals, infirmaries, and sanitariums. So all these places are tax exempt, but outpatient care is not. So that does create a lot of inconsistency in with outpatient versus inpatient treatment. Outpatient care is a vital continuation of healthcare services. It should really be treated equally regarding tax exemptions. Another thing is economic benefit. So, like you said, if we can remove the privilege tax, that can also increase more local spending on other taxable items, right? So if you're lowering tax somewhere else, then it can also increase in other areas that you're removing from. And that's it. So again, I fully support your bill, and that's all I have for you today.
Ma'am, and can you make sure you provide us a copy of your testimony?
Oh, yes, I will provide it.
Okay, and anything you talked about, the graph, your chart, whatever.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you. Ma'am.
Good morning. I am Natasha Hebert. I am the operating officer at Guam Rexall Drugs. So this is my sister. She's a head pharmacist, so she does all the patient care, and I pay the bills, right? And a lot of times, we have this, issue with not just the prescription drugs that you said, but also over the counter, where we're looking at the costs, how much it costs for the medicines itself to ship them in. We're a small pharmacy, right? So we're not getting these huge wholesale rates. We have to go through distributors. So already our cost is up there. I'm bringing this in shipping. She's, great with her patients in that she special orders things for them as much as she can. So, we're looking at additional costs for having these special orders, having things sent in within the week, right? So we're not having our patients wait a month to get their things, over the boat. And then also on top of that, right, we have all of our credit card fees, right? So things just add up so quickly, and then on top of that, we have the 5%. So there's times when, we're looking at some of these medications that we're bringing in, and I'm looking at the cost, and we lose money to bring it in just for our patients. And we do make that decision sometimes, but, having the removal of this 5%, gets us closer to at least breaking even, right? So now I'm not, bringing these things in and we're losing money just to help out our patients, but, at least we're breaking even, or maybe even making some money, right? And the other thing I notice is sometimes we have patients that come in, and because the costs are high, or because we can't afford to bring in specialty medications, they're losing treatment. They're not picking up their medications, We're not able to bring in those medications. So, any way that we can like have cost savings here, that means that we're able to provide better health care, able to bring in more medications, we're able to, lower, we're always happy to lower our prices where we can. If we save money on shipping, we always adjust our prices in store. We don't, that's why sometimes you'll see like our prices fluctuate, because if we can give cost savings to our customers, we do so, And in the same way, like if you guys are gonna reduce the 5% for us, we'd be happy to also pass that on to our consumers, because we want them to come to our store. We want them to come and get their medication, because they're not just picking up their medications, they're shopping for all other things when they're there. And, so yes, they're going to be able to save, it is going to be a bigger cost for you guys because you're going to lose that 5%. But then, like my sister was saying, the other items that we sell in store, right, you're going to be able to hopefully make it up there. And then one of the big things too, she had with the pharmaceuticals is with the mail order drugs, that's taking a big amount of revenue away from Guam, because why would they buy it in our pharmacy at a higher cost when they can get it cheaper off island? Right? And that same thing goes with some of the OTCs now, They can order things off of Amazon. People can go on Target.com, and it's hard for us to match those prices because we're not a huge, we don't get those huge wholesale prices. So now you're taking business out from locally and people are just ordering online because, hey, it's cheaper to get it online. So, yeah, I think that's the end of my testimony. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to also recognize my colleague that has joined us, Senator Barnett. I just have simple questions. Jenny, you estimated between 20 to 35 million, correct? Or $40 million max? Estimate high number. Going back to the two ladies here, you identified that there's online, people are bringing in drugs online? It's not going to the... Is there any way on the revenue and tax side that can be controlled? Because I'm just concerned is because there's certain things that shouldn't be brought online. It needs to go to some sort of control.
We do have what is called the use tax. So anything that is not being brought in for retail sale would be subject to the use tax. It's not a problem if it's coming through the port or the airport, because the customs officers will look at the bill of lading, look at the descriptions, tack on the use tax if the person bringing in the item does not have a retail license. The problem here is we have the post office, and what she talked about was that it's not that they're getting away without paying the use tax, it's just that we have no way to enforce it because the post office is, not federal, it's a federal property. We've discussed that, but we haven't come up with a solution on how we can go through the post office and start assessing use tax on items brought in through that matter, through that.
Okay, so that's something that Guam Custom needs to get involved more than revenue and tax. The use tax, anything brought in, because anything brought in through the port, Guam Customs gets involved. And I see where you ladies come from, and on all the drug companies. With that, I'm going to ask Senator Juan if he has any questions, can ask questions, and we'll begin with Senator Quinanta immediately after Senator Juan.
Okay, thank you very much. In the estimate revenue loss, have you also calculated, as the two young ladies had said, that the savings on the revenue loss, basically on the exemption of food and medicine, have you guys calculated the gain on other products being bought as well? And let me go back to this. When GovGuam puts its request in regards to the compact impact migration to Guam and the cost, the federal government comes back and says, you're not doing it right because your formula's not right, because you're not offsetting it with the contributions that they're putting into Guam, the work and the taxes that they're paying and things of that nature. So what is your loss ratio versus your gain? So your loss, in you say the revenue that you're going to lose based on your estimate, what is the gain? Because as the young ladies have said, what they're going to save in meds, they're going to buy other things in the store that are not exempt from the GRT. So have you gauged the two? What is you said the high of 40 million. Well, what is the gain?
The 40 million is just for food and restaurant sales. The medicine that I was able to estimate, it was very rough because we don't know, but we went in through the 2021 Guam Statistical Yearbook to look at medicine, and it came up to maybe at the most $2 to $3 million that we would lose in revenue. So honestly, that doesn't seem like a big impact as compared to the food and the restaurant industry.
Okay, but would you also say that most people that have savings on one entity tend to take that savings and spend it elsewhere?
I mean, when you look at something that costs $100 and it's now $95 because the medicine is exempt from GRT, I mean,
It
if you
gives
look
you
at it from that
$5
way,
to
that's
spend.
$5 that they can
Sure.
use toward other supplies and things like
Sure.
that. One of the also things factored in that nobody discussed was the fact that, you know, we have insurance. Medical insurance does cover a lot of the medical expense toward, and that's just a pharmaceutical drug versus the non-prescription drug. I don't see how we would use a gain. I mean, they might maybe buy a more expensive type of non-prescription drug over a generic one. That's the only gain I can see in regards to what we're talking about. But financial impact, I can't see anything in regards to
Sure. No,
medicine.
and I give it to you. Actually, yeah. But I know that the savings again. You know, again, I go back to what the federal government tells us with the impact of migration and the costs that's incurred by Guam. Supposedly, we're supposed to also give the counter as the impact that they have, you know, the revenues that they bring in as well. And that is why for the longest time, we haven't been compensated supposedly as we say what is owed to us, because we have not given the other side of the equation the positive impact that has been brought in. So like the young ladies were telling us here, the pharmacist was telling us here, that the savings in this entity will be offset by that $5 will be spent on somewhere else. Well, we see that. So anyway, I rest my case on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Canata, you have any questions for the ladies?
I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you guys for coming out today. Really appreciate your input. Thank you to DRT also for being present. That'll be all.
Thank you, Senator Blas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and ladies, thank you very much for your testimony. You know, and I appreciate. You're right. You know, with regard to having to deal with off-island, you know, mail order, and then trying to be able to struggle. But I appreciate this conversation because I have to go ahead and I have to agree with the author of the legislation. Thank you very much, Ms. Antoine, for the presentation of what the analysis is. But you know, as was stated by everybody, that while we can look to eliminating the gross receipts tax on the prescription and on the food, that money then will be spent elsewhere where that tax will still be collected. Okay, I think that if we were looking at at eliminating something where wholesale, you know, with everything, then I can probably see where we're going to lose revenue. But I think that in this case, it's actually going to be revenue neutral, but then more advantageous for our businesses on the island, because then it will encourage. If the prices were lower, there's no sense in having to wait. Mail order, you're still going to have to wait 3 or 4 days at least to be able to get it, as opposed to being able to get it now at a more comparable price and get it in your hands now. Okay? It pains to hear that there are many individuals that don't get the medication they need because they can't afford it. Or that you're not able, while you know what kind of medication they need, you can't bring it in. And it's because of a price point. And if we can do our job to be able to bring that price point down, not only would it help so that we can bring the medication in, but I think then we can stave off what is probably going to be a more costlier expense if this individual had to go get the medical care. Am I right? So I think there's the advantages of doing this. I'm full support of this piece of this legislation. And while I understand and I recognize that we want to be able to do this just for 12 months, I think this is something that we shouldn't have to tax at all. In that most other times when you're going to purchase something, it's going to be purchased out of desire. Okay? You want to be able to go to a store to be able to buy some clothes is out of desire, most times. But when an individual buys, medication, or in some cases food, that's out of need. And when we have to, as a government, tax on a need, but we make it difficult for the community to be able to get that need, I think we're doing more damage to the community than helping them. And so, I appreciate the conversation and I appreciate the testimony. You were able to bring, and I appreciate the perspective you brought from the industry. And based on your experiences, the decisions that some of your customers have to make in order to get something that they need. And, if the government stands in the way of that, I'm all for the government getting out of the way for that. So thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Barros. Senator Duenas?
Sidus Masi, Mr. Chairman, and I don't have any questions for the ladies from Rexall. I want to just thank you for coming forward today and providing your testimony. I think you've given us a lot of reason to move forward with this. You've made a great presentation, and we thank you for stepping forward today to come to this hearing. It's a very important issue, and getting your input of the direct impact and the direct impact to patients, most especially, and their lives, being on the line, taking life-saving medicine. I think that even if we walked away at some point and just did medicine, I'm going to be happy, but I'm hoping it's going to go all the way. So I just wanted to, first of all, thank you for coming out. Ms. Santalan, I have a couple questions for you. First of all, were you asked either by the governor's office or by your superiors to coordinate your testimony with BBMR?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so I think it's important so that obviously, did they communicate their findings or what they saw in this legislation directly with the Department of Revenue and Taxation?
I'm not in communication with BBMR. Maybe my superiors are, but I wasn't privy to that information.
Okay, so for the public that's watching, we're going to read a portion of their statement into the record because it's very important. They state after the opening on what the bill does. This is from BBMR, and it's signed off by Lester Carlson, which is the director. The impact of exempting BBTs from the cost of food and medicine may fall within the wholesaling and retailing categories of the BPT. Fiscal comments received from the Department of Revenue and Taxation note that the department does not have administrative or sales data to ascertain the dollar value of food or medicine sold by local retailers to measure its overall fiscal impact on the government tax revenues. They further conclude that the overall fiscal impact would be a reduction in BPT revenues. However, the department is not able to accurately measure the impact should the bill become law. Additionally, based on comments received, okay, this goes into a GITA issue which we'll debate on our side in terms of bonds, but I'm a little surprised at your presentation today of $40 million impact. And the reason why I'm surprised, Ms. Santalan, and this is why I'll ask you this question. We're all aware of what happened when we increased the BPT from 1% for 1% back in 2018. I don't want to go into the details of that, but this is key to why I'm going to ask you this question. The fiscal impact was clear and now has been shown across the last 4 fiscal years that the impact of the 1% overall BPT is approximately $60 million annually, and that's for everything. Now, your testimony this morning is a little troubling to me. It would seem to represent that the reduction of, or the elimination of BPT from food and medicine is 2/3 of the $60 million 1% adjustment across the board. I find that phenomenal. So I have to ask you this, can you give us a table, because we're going to need this when we debate this bill on the floor. Can you give us a table, and because BBMR said that you, Rev and Tax told them that you could not ascertain this, can you provide a table to the committee so that we can kind of evaluate the veracity of your presentation today?
Sure. I think the problem there is not many people at Revenue Tax know how to draw down the data. They don't look at industry standards. They don't look at averages. What I had done was I looked at averages, for example, the food market industry in the States, and I like to think it's almost comparable. And again, we do take conservative percentages. So what I had done was we have the retail sales. And I think the problem there is because they wanted to tie in with our business license. How many grocery stores are given business licenses? And unfortunately, we're still trying to be more efficient with the business license. So we have to look at other data, which I did. Again, I was not asked by BMR or my superior, so I'm in the dark on that. I think if they had asked me earlier, because this again was a rough thing. I wasn't aware of this until a couple of days ago, so I did my best. Looked at the food industry, looked at the 2021 Guam Statistical Yearbook, because they talk about imports. This is how much food is imported into Guam. When you get that, you factor in what is the markup for a wholesaler, what is the markup for a retailer, okay? And then the industry standard at grocery stores, there's like supposedly based on the food market industry, and there was another called a trading economic website that I went to, and it was pretty similar. So I took 3 different scenarios based on 3 different studies that were done, and the amounts came out pretty comparable. What is hard is the restaurant industry. And again, I didn't have enough time to get more percentages, so I even did a very conservative effort. Example for retail sales. We know that 13% of that, based on the Trading Economic website for the Industry Association, they're saying 13% comprises retail sales for groceries, supermarkets. From there, we have to determine, well, what is the average markup? So a lot went into this last minute. So we have the data that BBMR doesn't have, and if you don't ask us the right questions, if you don't do the right research, of course you're not going to get the answer. So again, I don't like to say I don't have an answer. I will give you an answer to the best of what I can come up with. I will tell you this is how I came up with it. It may not be accurate, but it's the best we can do with the data that we have. There is always a way to draw down data. You just have to know the right person to do it, and you need to know what the right website to look for. We always have that joke, Google it. I do that quite a bit, and you'd be amazed about the information that I do find that nobody finds. They're like, well, I can't find it. Well, did you put in the right words to Google it? Okay, so I managed to do that. So Again, I can't say what transpired or what conversations BBMR had with my superiors. I wasn't in any emails or anything. They just say, hey, Jenny, can you come up with a figure? I said, sure.
Okay.
That's what I do.
Yeah, this is just personally, my doctor always tells me don't do Dr. Google. Because if I do my own treatment, he will not establish the veracity of that treatment regimen. He says, if you want to be treated by me, but you can Google to fix your boat, but not for your doctor. I just wanted to throw that in. So the problem I have, Ms. Antalan, and I'm glad that, so then your testimony then was cleared by your Director of Revenue Tax.
Well, it was my deputy director that had told me at 8 p.m. last night, says, hey, can you attend the hearing because we won't be available. So that's the only information that I have right now.
Okay, but so this is in your capacity as a division head? This is your calculation, but wasn't cleared with your superiors?
No, this was cleared with my superiors. I had emailed this. This was emailed to them yesterday.
Okay.
And so they said, based on what I had presented, can you go down to the hearing, which is why I'm here.
Okay. So I really only have one more follow-up question, but I'm going to say that based on your testimony, and you're going to provide that table to the committee, right? Based on your testimony and based on the table that we'll receive from the committee, I'm going to write a letter to the committee chair to convene a oversight immediately. Because if this calculation is right, and it's $40 million BPT on a food and medicine exemption, and a 1% BPT increase of the overall BPT yielded $60 million annually, we possibly either have a huge anomaly or a serious underreporting of revenue. Because just food and medicine elimination from this at $40 million is very, very serious in the grand scheme of things when you talk about all the retail, all the construction, everything else that happens in our community. That if we take out food and medicine, it's a $40 million impact to the general fund. Now, I'm going to finish my statement by saying that I believe, as the anecdotal information that's been provided by our medical folks today that deal in medicine, and just the fact that it's food and medicine, I don't know one human being on Guam, even middle class and upper class individuals who have significant salaries, that aren't expending 90 to 95% of just about everything that they take in on a payday basis. Which means to me that if I'm going to save $300 a month on food and medicine based on this BPT exemption, I guarantee you every dollar just about of that is going right back into the economy, because I just don't have that flexible income to not have to use that money for gas, for groceries, to pay my power, to do everything that I have to do on a daily basis in order to be able to survive on Guam. I really think that we're going to need that table to balance what you said today, but we're also going to have to really forensically examine your presentation today, because that is a huge amount of money in the grand scheme of things when we take this food and medicine exemption benchmarked against the overall BPT. Yeah. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I want to see this table, and I will probably be writing a letter to you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and just to clarify, that 40 million had certain factors in. It was like between 30 to 40 million, okay? And that is a conservative figure. That 40 million is if, again, and that I had to put in, because what if we do an analysis and they're like, oh, Jen, it's 40 million, not 30 million? Because there are certain factors. Again, the interpretation of the law. The fact that certain businesses don't have POS systems, so they're going to guesstimate how much in food sales, how much in medicine. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these small mom and pop grocery stores say, oh, it's 95%. Okay, with lack of POS systems, and we go and audit and said, are you sure it's 95%? We have to go in and audit those things. So that 40 million is the maximum possible based on those factors. I'm not saying it's going to be 40 million, understand that. I said it could be as high as 40 million, depending on how people interpret the law and what kind of system they have to keep track of that.
Yeah, as a follow-up to that, Ms. Santalan, I would say this, though. If we just go to this latest CRER, and we go to the BPT overall at 5% for everything, I mean, you're in this analysis here on an annual basis, at $40 million, we're probably in the range of 10 to 15% of the overall BPT collections. So if food and medicine is representative of that year over year, and so we got to look at the aggregate. How is it this is going to represent a $40 million impact over 300 or 200, and I think I have to go into it myself, but it's between 280 between the last few years to 300 some on BPT alone. 40 million of that's between 10 to 15% of all the BPT we take in. So something's wrong in terms of food and medicine, and then every other category, if 1% brings in 60 million. That something's wrong with that calculation, and we're gonna have to sit down and put some auditing to that, because that in my simple math in my head right now at that impact, then we got to find out where the leakage is, because that means there must be some severe underreporting of BPT, because that doesn't work out in the entire equation. And I'll provide my own table to you from what you've presented today, but please provide the table for the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. And the amount, 1% is from the last budget, Senator Duenas, was identified over $70 million. Senator Tello, do you have any question for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to my colleagues, and thank you, everyone, for coming and testifying. You know, we realize that you do your research, and you come here and prepared, and we greatly appreciate it, especially those who are in the trenches and deal with our community and see the hardship that most of our people experience. With Ms. Antalan, is that correct? Okay. There is an oversight hearing for revenue tax on September 29th, so I'm going to request that the committee chair incorporate, the scale that we're looking for. Maybe that'll be helpful and give you enough time to provide us that information, because I think what's happening is that we know that the 5% may not be possible because of bond covenants, and that it may only go down to be able to give any kind of savings is what our people need. Maybe about a 2% decrease, going back to 3%. Keeping the 3% because of bond covenants and shaving off the 2%. For at least food and medicine may be more doable. I mean, I would prefer, just the whole 5% across the board. But it's something we've been advocating, at least, and the Republicans been advocating to reduce the BPT. And we're going to continue to fight it. And I thank the good author of this legislation for not giving up the fight, continuing to carry the torch. And it is for our people. I do have a question with regards to the pharmacy. It's mega drugs, right? Is that, no, or what is? Rexall. Oh, yes. Oh, my God. That's Gabriel. That's my, I always go there. So between the two of you, yeah, I'm sorry. You were so small when I knew you. I am getting old, and I've been told I've been getting old. I'm an old, hag? But yeah, that's right. You were much younger, and appreciate you coming back to Guam and serving the island. And, that's right. Say hi to your mom. Is it required that you incorporate the PPT on your receipts? The cost that is charged, do you require it?
For our customers?
Yes.
Oh, no. We pay that cost and we don't pass it on to them.
Okay, so the PPT is paid, so you don't put it on a receipt, because some places, you go, even on restaurants, they add like a service charge, or they add the PPT on it. Some stores do that, but you guys don't do it.
No, and the big thing with the pharmaceuticals, like she had mentioned, so the insurance companies will only give us a set cost for each of those medications. They don't think about how much it costs for us to freight it in. If she has to airmail it because it's, cold medicine, that's not part of the cost. And then, so whatever that set national cost is, that's what it is, right? It's a national wholesale price. So they're not thinking about how much more expensive it is on Guam to bring in those things versus, in the States, they don't have those huge costs associated with that. And again, they don't think about us being a small pharmacy versus those huge retail pharmacies. So whatever, they dictate as the cost that insurance will reimburse us, that's it. Everything else, the business has to eat that cost. And that's why we were saying earlier, some of the specialty drugs, and these are like, $20,000 drugs, like $10,000. These aren't cheap drugs, and this is every month, right? Some of these patients have to be on them. So these easily go up very quickly in costs. And, even, one of the big things is if a customer doesn't pick up the drug, we always joke around like, oh, we just threw away a car, right? But so that's why we also have to make that choice, like look at all the costs associated with bringing this drug. And, you're looking at a $10,000 drug, that 5%, it's a lot for us, and every month, and then multiple patients, so.
Well, and that's why I shop at Rexall. Don't mean to endorse it, but I do shop there all the time, for all my needs. For Rev and Tax, is there a requirement by law to incorporate or show the BPT on the receipts?
Before we had what was called the visible, sorry, where you in order to save, you would divulge how much you're paying in GRT to the customer. Some businesses still do that, but no, you cannot pass on or you cannot make it separate and apart from the price. It has to be incorporated. You can show what you're going to give to Rev and Tax, but if an item is $10, that's all you pay.
So if you go into a store like Macy's and it says $10, and then on the receipt, and then below it, it gives a 5% BPT, which, from that, so now it's $10.50, right? They can do that, right?
No, there was a court case.
They can't.
There was a court case, and that was thrown out.
Okay.
Because we have another, I'm not familiar with it, I think it was Mergafa versus, I forgot what it was, but it is against the law on Guam to separate the GRT from the price of the item that's for sale.
Thank you, Ms. Vantalan. There is a testimony we received, and it's from Payless, and Payless said that Payless will deduct the 5% off each allowable item and print the savings on each receipt. We want to make sure that our community is provided the full benefit of the GRT suspension. Of course, they support the legislation. So, again, I'm not going to belabor this any longer. Just wanted to ensure that, no, I asked that question. It was asked. So, again, appreciate you being here today, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Brown?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Certainly welcome, and good morning to those of you that have come to provide testimony. I did want to ask Reverend Tax, Ms. Untalan, you had mentioned, is it a certain scanning device or something that business would have to scan the items that they're selling so you can distinguish between, as you were mentioning earlier, what is food, what is non-food related that you might have in a local convenience store, so you actually can determine what is, if we were to put this in place, what is or is not being taxed at which amount?
You're talking about the POS system that I had recommended? Right, with the POS system, it tells you what is being sold, so that when it comes time to do your books and records, you can determine what item goes to what to determine your cost of goods sold, to maybe determine your profit margin. But that would be something that we would require in an audit. We need your documents, your POS system. Please break it down by types of items sold. In regards to scanning, that's part and parcel of the POS system.
But that's, not every business has that. I'm assuming you go to a little mom and pop store, they just, they don't have that sophisticated.
Correct. And we're talking about grocery stores, we're talking about restaurants, mom and pop restaurants. How often do you see, we know some that deal with cash only.
Yeah.
So again, that's what I had referred to that 40 million, that is the potential. It can go as high as 40 million because of the fact that people will interpret the law differently. They don't have a good set of records. They're just going to guesstimate. And a lot of times, taxpayers tend to guesstimate on the higher level.
And so how do you audit them then if it's a small operation that doesn't have the scanning equipment, this POS system you're talking about? I mean, how do they show what they've sold? How do you verify, especially if it is cash only? Because cash, disappears quickly.
Right.
There's no record of it, no charge, so.
Exactly, and that is the one most difficult thing is doing an audit, because if you don't have any, or a shoebox, they literally will go through each item, and we're looking at invoices. So we would start off with, let me look at the invoices, what did you purchase? And this is from the grocery store. We want to look at all the items that you purchased, and then we do a markup. Most grocery stores, it can be anywhere from 10% to 50% on markup. So we have to, I'm assuming some of them have receipts. We have to do an average and say, okay, based on the sales, based on the purchases, this is your profit margin. And from there, we determine, and in this case, if we're going to audit food, well, we look at your inventory for a set of month. 1 month, we look at how much you bought. We take out the items for food, do the profit margin, et cetera, and then say this is what you're supposed to be exempting from 5%. If it's higher than that, of course, we make the adjustment and make them pay back.
And how many audits would you do like that on an average year? And how many personnel do you have to do these audits?
Right now, exam only has about maybe, and I'm just guessing, about 5 agents and auditors. We normally should have 20. So in regards to this, if we had to do an audit, we have to prioritize what we're going to audit. This may be on the low priority considering all the other audits that we do. Yeah, so we're looking at not really touching those.
So I just take the gamble, if I was running a little business, you're never going to get around to me, so, right? And I think, where Senator Chris Duenas was talking about the leakage factor of knowing whether or not these taxes are being collected, I mean, that's something we need to look at. Because, I mean, in all fairness, and I appreciate the testimony from the representatives here from Rexall Drugs in relaying what they will do, certainly if this legislation were to pass. But at the other end, and certainly being a consumer on Guam, there probably will be businesses, even though I will support this legislation, there will be businesses that probably will not roll back their prices. And there's no way to verify that unless you're a regular customer, there's a certain item that you've bought, and then you would notice either whether or not they rolled the prices. Because I've seen, as we all have, some items have increased by dollars, $5, $6, $10, a single item. It might be something, of course, you regularly buy and you notice a jump within a year or two. It's quite significant. And then also when you shop off island, understanding that, we're dealing with the issues of scale in terms of population, what wholesale price they're getting may be lower. But some items on Guam, especially things that are essential, I've noticed, are marked up hundreds of percents, not 10, 15, 20, because certainly for those of us that are here, we're kind of limited unless you're going to go, order it, or you're going to go travel and bring it back for your consumption, which most people are not going to be able to do. You're kind of stuck with what you get or what you can get here. So I think that's something we need to be mindful of. And colleagues, I know our chairman used to work at Rev and Tax, but that's an area at the same time, because I'd like to think in all good faith people do the right thing. I think we know in experience it's not the reality. And for some people, money is the name of the game. I mean, they're going to make it, and they don't care whether they're doing it right or wrong. As long as they make, I don't know, they can take it with them, but there's that idea that I'm going to make as much as I can. And unfortunately, our consumers here, when we talk about the high cost of living, some of these costs are legitimate, some of them are not. So I think we just need to be mindful of that, because I don't have a problem in reducing the size of government. I don't have the problem in reducing the revenue coming into government, because I don't see a better outcome with all the money we're spending. I don't see it. I don't know what you do in your own lives here on Guam, but I haven't seen any great improvement in any aspect of my life, except the fact that I can go and register with my vehicle without having to physically go to Rev and Tax to do that. That's the one improvement I've seen. I personally don't like dealing with the government if I have to, because I'm ultimately, in most cases, disappointed. And that's me, who's someone who's very visible. I can't imagine the average person out there who they don't even know who you are, much less care. in terms of the type of service that you get back from the government. So I think that's something we need to be mindful of, because there are going to be businesses, unfortunately, that are not going to be as forthcoming as what Payless has put in writing here, that they're going to show it on their receipts. And that's something we need to be mindful of. And already, if the reality is that there is no proper regulation of these collections of these taxes, then the odds are fairly good that even if we do roll this back, unfortunately, we're going to have some businesses that are going to pocket the money. And then when and if the time comes when the government realizes it's spending beyond its reality and taxes are going to be put back in place, the increase to that item is even going to be even more. So I think we just need to balance that reality. And I appreciate for you coming, and you know, I've been going to Rexall since I was a little kid. I mean, I remember that when the ITC building was built in 1975. And the fact that you're still in business and doing what you're doing to support our community. I really appreciate your testimony. I just think we need to balance that reality, Mr. Chair, knowing that Rev and Tax more than likely is not going to go out and really regulate these businesses to even verify that they are rolling back the 5% and not simply continuing to charge the same cost. Because who's checking? I mean, look at the thousands of items that are sold, food items that are sold every day. And we've seen those jumps, and you know, they're going to say it's supply, and we understand from the pandemic that obviously there has been increased cost. When you actually look what you're able to purchase when you go shopping, grocery shopping, you know, the basket's getting smaller. The cost of what you're paying out is increasing. So I'm supportive of this, but again, I think the reality is if we're not able to properly regulate it, we have nowhere to verify whether or not retailers are actually reducing their costs to our consumers. And definitely the decrease of revenue into the government, for those colleagues that love spending, this is going to be a big reality check, and I think that's forthcoming in the next year or 2 or 3. But I think we just need to weigh all those factors and be mindful that fortunately, there are going to be retailers out there that are not going to be as upfront and truthful with regards to reducing these taxes. I think that there's some, unfortunately, that are going to just pocket the difference and keep the cost at its current price tag that our people are having to pay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for all of you coming in providing your testimony this morning.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Barnett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming out to testify. I think it's pretty clear we all go to Rexall. Just go to Taco Bell and then Rexall. There's no more Taco Bell, but I appreciate that you're pocketing a lot of the expense and not passing it on to your customers, and you know, I commend you and also Payless for saying that they'll pass on the savings, and I think that's going to be the big challenge, is to make sure that these savings are passed on to the consumer, especially in the realm of medicine. I just met with a constituent a couple days ago, and they came up and they brought all of their prescriptions, and they basically said, Senator, it's a husband and wife, government of Guam insured, and they're both diabetic. And they said, okay, so just to get by every day with diabetes, we need, you know, this amount of medicine. And she went down the different things, the metformin, all those other things, and she said, this is going to cost us $300 a month. But what we really need is we need these extra medications as well. And so our families are making tough decisions about which medicines they're prescribed they're going to be able to afford and which ones they're just not going to be able to get because they can't afford them. So any way that we can pass on these savings, I understand the arguments about the revenue loss, and I don't know, maybe in the committee or on the floor we can, I mean, groceries, I'm good with it, right? But you know, passing on the savings to people who are dining in a 5-star restaurant, I'm not, you know, so sure if that, you know, fits the narrative of the bill. You know, with all due respect to the author, who again I, you know, commend, as well as the chair for hearing this measure. So, yeah, I think definitely our people could use the savings on the medicine and especially the food, and I thank you, and especially you, Mrs. Antolan. How long have you been with the department?
At least 30 years.
30 years. Well, I thank you for coming down to testify, and you know, answer all these pesky questions from my colleagues. You know, especially since I'm pretty sure everyone was expecting the director or the deputy director. So I know what it's like when they tell you where to go and you got to go there. So thank you very much for coming, and also thank you for your testimony this morning. Sidus Masi, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Barnett. Before I ask Senator Lujan to close, first I'd like to advise my colleagues that Ms. Antolan is the former or current administrator for Technical Research and Appeals Board. So when you all want to know interpretation of law, she would be the lady, just to let you know that. And then on the issue of Rexall, when you say you absorb the 5%, you don't pass it on. Okay. It's amazing. There are some folks, some businesses have told me they absorb it, but until, I'm going to reintroduce my bill again to make the BBT visible so we can see it. And the only reason why is because I think Subway was the only one that was doing it other than Macy's, because I was at Revenue and Tax when we went after them. But Subway, what they do is they identify upfront incorporating the 5% into the meal. At the end, the price is still the same. In other words, the cost of the item absorbed the 5%, then it became a total cost. So if you did that, then I can understand that. But if you're not doing that, then you guys got some money. 5% is a lot of money. I know you guys are working it. But my concern is that the BBT has to be visible. It has to be shown the receipt. And in order for this to work, because exactly as Senator Brown says, if you don't have enough auditors to do what you need to do to audit, we're never going to get the tracking. No different than what Senator Duane says. There may be missing link here somewhere. And that's why and thank you, Senator Tello, for mentioning that there's going to be an oversight on revenue and tax, because I'm going to ask that question. I used to work there. And I used to go to the business to check them, and if they were selling anything on cash basis, and there's no receipt, we issue them a fine. It's $2,000. And many of them have turned around and started issuing receipts. Some of them that can issue receipt didn't give a receipt, we fine them. That's called the Cash Empowerment Act, okay? And then if you don't have a license, then we issue you a fine of $500. There's a bunch of mechanisms in place. Unfortunately, Revenue and Tax is not equipped with enough folks. It actually should be a lot bigger, but it's not. But on the note of this bill, I have truly no objection to a certain degree, and the reason why is because the BBT we can't get any lower than 3. Okay, and if you guys remember correctly, a few years back, I tried to introduce the sales tax, which have reduced all the BBT for everybody to 3, but 2% is the sales tax. So and medicine and food would be exempt. Then at least we're not giving everything away. And even though Chamber will say, yeah, they like this, great. First business to say they'll reduce it is Payless. Good for them. But for me, until I see it in the receipt, that this is what you used to charge or what you were charging and you reduce it, then I can believe it. Because I don't know, if you tell me the item was $5 and I'm going to reduce it by 5%, really? Was it $5 or was it 3? Because we all have to admit, if you buy anything that's mainland and you bring it in, what's causing a lot of our goods to come in expensive is the Jones Act. If that changes, if that ever changes, it'll help us. It'll reduce a little bit. Then reduce our taxes, then it'll help us. We just keep going down. And I agree with what my colleagues have brought up. We need to find a way to reduce it. Because we got to get the government to be better managed in some form or fashion. And I'll leave that alone at that, and I ask Senator Lujan to go ahead and do his closing, and we'll wrap this up. But thank you, and please provide your testimony. And Ms. Antolan, they're asking if you can provide your table, something that we can follow. Okay?
Yeah, because I think Senator Tello said that I will provide it on September 28th.
Over the round
do
table?
the oversight at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if you
Yes,
just indulge
yes.
me, I want to make sure there's no misunderstanding here, Ms. Antolan. Okay, I want to be clear that what was shocking is in a $6 billion economy yielding $300 million in BPT, your representation today is of the $300 million, $40 million is 14% of all of the, and this is why I want to be clear, I'm not attacking your numbers and saying they're wrong. What I'm saying is, if that's the case, and I'm looking forward to that oversight, and I actually would appreciate your table today, because that means then there has to be a significant underreporting and leakage. There is just no other way around it. Because if food and medicine is 14% of the $300 million at 5% that we're bringing in BPT, then something's wrong, because we're collecting that on a multi-billion-dollar economic activity within our community. That's the issue I have, is that if that representation of 14% of $300 million in BPT is just food and medicine, then and that's the impact, then we've got a serious issue in terms of how the tax is being applied.
Okay, just to clarify, where did you get the 300 million?
That's 5% basically, because remember, 1% represents 60 million. So if you take, now it's 70 for this year, which means it's even more. So what I'm saying is that if we increase 1% of BPT, and that's everything, the average net was $60 million. This year, it was $70 million, okay? So if you just do the simple math of before 6 times 5, now it's 7, or it's 70 million. So that's another 4 times 5, 350 million now. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that if that's the collection rate, when you do your math, because if 60 million is 1%, it's 300 times 5. Now it's 350. But what I'm saying is if food and medicine represents 14% of that total number, then all the other business activity outside of food and medicine is the other 86%. That is a major issue in terms of how that representation is based on all the taxes we collect under BPT. And I'm just saying your representation of that. Because, and also, Mr. Chairman, in closing, we have a hard time here when we get representations from 2 different agencies. BBMR is the cash management organization for our government. You are the collector. And the bottom line is when they make a statement like this, that you didn't have the ability to ascertain the numbers, and then you make this presentation, there's my first issue. My second issue is doing the simple numbers. It's a sticker shock to me to say that impact on just food and medicine of the grand total of BPT is 14%. I want to see a serious audit. And I've gotten some messages from auditors that are telling me I'm right. So I just thank you very much for that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Lon. Your closing?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, panel. Thank you, Ms. Antalan, for your testimony this morning, and of course to the Rexall Drugs Sisters Gabriel, right? Yeah. Well, thank you very much again. Didn't realize again, you know, the extent that pharmacies, or maybe in your particular pharmacy, had gone through again to get the meds to again the folks that are patients of yours. But thank you for that. It means a lot that the chairman says he agrees with most of the bill. So that means a lot. And likewise, when he mentioned the Jones Act, I had a sister resolution to that as well, to have an exemption of the Jones Act for 24 months, alongside, of course, the reduction BPT from 5 to 4. So these are triplet bills. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because then he'll support my resolution on the Jones Act exemption and and removal. Okay, but likewise, major portions of the bill, and I would your testimony today will warrant us, of course, to look and amend this bill before it gets on the floor. But thank you again. Your testimony this morning was very helpful and very productive, and I now know how pharmacies run a little better. Not much, but a little better now. But thank you very much for that, and thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for hearing this bill this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lon. There being no one else to present testimony on this bill, this hearing is now concluded. I want to thank everyone for attending this hearing and providing feedback and suggestion. Bill number 4-37 COR public hearing is now adjourned. The time now is 10:11. Please be safe and take care, and enjoy your weekend.